Hello, dear listeners, and welcome to today's story. Ethan sat at his desk, staring blankly at the screen in front of him. The light from the computer illuminated his face in the otherwise dim office room. It was another late night at work. He glanced at the clock, almost 9 p.m. The office was nearly empty, but he could hear the faint sounds of people typing away, phones ringing, and the hum of printers. The typical sounds of a corporate world. But tonight, there was something different in the air. Ethan had been with the company for 6 years now. He had started out as a junior analyst, working long hours, eager to prove himself. It had paid off. He was now a senior project manager, leading a team, overseeing important accounts, and receiving accolades. On paper, his life was what most people would envy. He had the title, the office, the salary, and the respect. Yet, something was missing. It wasn't that Ethan didn't like his job. In fact, he was good at it, but the satisfaction he once felt from meeting deadlines and solving problems had started to fade. The days were starting to blur together, like an endless cycle of emails, meetings, and reports. He had lost track of the last time he'd taken a real break or had done something for himself. His mind was constantly racing, consumed by the demands of work. And even though he loved his job, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something important. As he worked on the latest project, his phone buzzed. He glanced down at the screen. It was a message from his mother. "How's everything going, dear? We miss you. It's been a while since we caught up." Ethan's heart sank. He hadn't spoken to his family in over a week. He had been so caught up in work that he had neglected the people who mattered most. Guilt washed over him as he realized how much time had passed since his last visit home, since he'd seen his parents, his younger sister, and the rest of his family. With a deep sigh, he replied, "Sorry, Mom. I've been really busy. I promise I'll visit this weekend." He hit send and returned to his work, but the message lingered in his mind. Why was it so hard to find time for the people who mattered most? He had told himself countless times that he would make time for them, but every time, work came first. His phone buzzed again, but this time it was a notification from his calendar. "Team meeting in 10 minutes. Prepare the presentation." Ethan groaned. Another meeting? Another task to check off the list. He quickly minimized his email window and prepared for the meeting, hoping he could finish this one quickly and get back to the endless list of tasks awaiting him. As he walked into the meeting room, he glanced around. His colleagues were all there, some of them looking just as tired as he felt. They smiled, exchanged pleasantries, and settled into their seats. The meeting started, and Ethan was back to his routine. Everyone spoke about their progress, their goals, and the latest deadlines. The familiar cycle continued. When the meeting finally ended, Ethan returned to his desk, feeling drained. He glanced at his watch. Almost 11 p.m. now. Another hour and he would be heading home. But even as he packed up his things, there was a nagging feeling in his chest. He wasn't sure what it was, but it felt like something was slowly slipping away from him. He left the office, the cool night air greeting him as he stepped outside. The streets were quiet, the only sounds being the distant hum of traffic. Ethan had to admit that the late nights were starting to take a toll on him. As he walked toward the subway, he couldn't help but think about what Sarah had said to him a few weeks ago. Ethan had known Sarah for years. She was a colleague who had started at the company just a few months before him. Unlike Ethan, Sarah seemed to have it all figured out. She always left work on time, never stayed late, and still managed to produce high-quality work. Ethan admired her for that, but he had never truly understood how she managed to maintain such a healthy work-life balance. One evening, as Ethan sat in his usual corner of the office, Working on a report that seemed never-ending, Sarah walked by with her bag slung over her shoulder. She smiled at him. "Still here?" Ethan sighed. "Yeah, just wrapping up this presentation. Another late night." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Another one? You really should take a break, Ethan. You're going to burn out if you keep this up." He chuckled nervously. "I'll be fine. It's just this one time. The project's almost done, and then I'll have a chance to relax." But Sarah didn't buy it. She pulled up a chair next to him. "Listen, Ethan, I've been there. I've worked my butt off to prove myself, stayed late every night, and ignored the people who mattered most. And you know what I realized? I wasn't getting anywhere. I was just burning out." Ethan glanced at her, surprised by her candidness. "What do you mean?" She leaned back in her chair. "I mean, I was so focused on work that I forgot about everything else. I wasn't spending enough time with my family, with my friends, and I wasn't even taking care of myself. I was miserable, even though on the outside, everything seemed perfect." Ethan shifted in his chair, absorbing her words. He had never really considered it like that. "So what changed?" "I set boundaries. I started leaving work on time. I stopped saying yes to every project that came my way, even if it meant disappointing someone. I started taking care of myself, physically, mentally, emotionally. And you know what? It didn't hurt my career. In fact, it made me more productive. I stopped burning out and I started living." Ethan couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over him. Maybe there was a way to balance work and life after all. But it seemed too good to be true. Could he really make that kind of change? Sarah smiled, reading his mind. "I know it's hard, Ethan, but trust me, you have to start somewhere. Take it one step at a time. Set your boundaries, take care of yourself, and make time for the people you care about." Ethan sat there for a moment, contemplating her words. He didn't have all the answers, but something inside him stirred. Maybe it was time for a change. He didn't know how to balance everything just yet, but he had to try. Life couldn't just be about work. The next morning, Ethan woke up feeling a bit lighter. It wasn't much, but there was a small shift in his mindset. He decided he would start small. He would leave the office on time today. No more late nights. He told himself it wasn't going to be easy. There would be plenty of work waiting for him, and deadlines wouldn't stop just because he decided to leave at 6 p.m. But for the first time in a while, he felt a flicker of hope. Maybe he could make time for himself. After all, that evening, as the clock struck 6 p.m., Ethan closed his laptop. It felt strange. For years, he had conditioned himself to stay late, to work longer hours, and to be the last one to leave. But today, he walked away from his desk at the scheduled time. As he packed his things into his bag, he glanced around the office. His colleagues were still working, some deeply immersed in their screens, while others rushed to finish their tasks. But Ethan didn't feel the familiar pressure to stay. He had made a decision, and he was going to stick to it. Walking out of the office building, Ethan felt a sense of freedom he hadn't felt in a long time. The evening air was cool against his face, the streets bustling with life as people headed home or met with friends. It was a sight Ethan hadn't fully appreciated in a while. He had been so caught up in his work that he had forgotten the simple pleasure of living in the moment. As he walked to the subway station, Ethan checked his phone and saw a message from his mother. "Hey, I was thinking about you today. Hope you're doing well. Let's talk soon, okay?" Ethan smiled, feeling the warmth of her message. This was exactly what he had been missing. Genuine connections. The simple act of staying in touch with those who mattered most. On the train ride home, Ethan thought about his conversation with Sarah. It wasn't just about leaving the office on time. It was about reclaiming his life, finding balance, and remembering that there was more to life than deadlines and meetings. For the first time in a long while, he felt hopeful. He knew he wasn't going to have it all figured out overnight, but he was ready to try. When he got home, Ethan did something he hadn't done in weeks. He cooked dinner for himself. A simple meal, nothing fancy, just a bit of pasta with some vegetables. It felt good to take care of himself, to slow down, and to enjoy a meal without rushing through it. As he ate, he thought about his next steps. He had to set more boundaries, to find time for his friends, and to prioritize his health. That night, after dinner, Ethan picked up his phone and dialed his sister's number. It rang for a few moments before she picked up. "Hey, Ethan, how's it going?" "I'm good, Sarah. I just wanted to check in. It's been a while since we talked." She chuckled. "Yeah, it feels like forever. How's work been?" "It's been busy, but I'm trying something new. I'm leaving work on time now," Ethan said with a smile, though his sister couldn't see it. "Really? That's a huge step. I'm proud of you, Ethan. You've been working so hard. It's about time you took care of yourself." Ethan chuckled. "Yeah, I'm starting to realize that there's more to life than just work. I need to find balance, you know?" His sister's voice softened. "You've always been the kind of person who puts everything into what you do, but you need to make time for the things that matter, like family, friends, and yourself." Ethan nodded, even though she couldn't see him. "I know, and that's what I'm going to do. Thanks for the reminder." As the conversation ended, Ethan felt a sense of peace. He knew it was going to be a challenge to stick to his new routine, but he was determined to make it work. For the first time in a long while, he felt like he was taking control of his life instead of just going through the motions. The days that followed were a mix of progress and setbacks. Ethan kept his promise to himself. He left work on time more often than he had in the past, and when he did, he made sure to focus on the things that mattered. He started exercising regularly, something he hadn't done in months. He spent more time with his family, and he made an effort to catch up with his friends. But there were still challenges. On some days, the pressure of work would build up, and he'd feel the urge to stay late. There were deadlines to meet, emails to respond to, and meetings to attend. But on those days, he would remind himself of the reasons he was making this change. He wasn't just working for a paycheck. He was working to build a life that he could truly enjoy. And that meant setting boundaries, even if it was hard. One evening, as he wrapped up a project early, Ethan sat at his desk, reflecting on the progress he had made. He smiled to himself. He was finally starting to understand what Sarah meant when she said that finding balance wasn't about abandoning work. It was about making time for what truly mattered. His phone buzzed, interrupting his thoughts. It was a text from Sarah. "How's the new routine going?" Ethan chuckled and typed a quick reply. "It's going well, actually. I've been making time for myself and it feels good. Thanks for the push." He hit send and leaned back in his chair, feeling a sense of gratitude. He wasn't perfect, and he knew he still had a long way to go. But for the first time in a long while, he felt like he was on the right path. It was a Saturday afternoon when Ethan had the most profound realization. He had been working from home, trying to catch up on some projects, when his phone rang. It was his mother. "Hey, Mom," Ethan answered, leaning back in his chair. "Hi, sweetheart. How's everything going?" "It's going well. Actually, I've been thinking a lot about things lately. I've been trying to slow down, take breaks, and focus on what really matters." "That's good to hear," his mother said warmly. "I know you've been so busy with work, but remember, you have a family who loves you." Ethan smiled, the weight of her words sinking in. It was true. He had been so focused on his career that he had neglected the people who cared about him most. But now things were different. He was taking the time to appreciate the small moments, to connect with his family, and to invest in his well-being. As he hung up the phone, Ethan realized that the true value of life wasn't in the number of hours worked, the number of projects completed, or the accolades earned. It was in the relationships, the experiences, and the moments of peace that truly mattered. As weeks passed, Ethan found himself navigating his new approach to life with more ease. The initial awkwardness of leaving work on time and setting boundaries was slowly fading, and he was beginning to feel more comfortable with his decisions. His colleagues had noticed the change too. They no longer saw him rushing into the office early or staying late to finish tasks. Instead, Ethan became more present, both during office hours and after. At first, some of his co-workers raised eyebrows. "Ethan, you're leaving, but you always stay late to wrap things up," his colleague Jake said one afternoon. Ethan, who had once been just as caught up in the whirlwind of deadlines, smiled and replied, "I've realized that I can still do my best work and meet my responsibilities while also making time for myself. A balance is key." Jake, usually skeptical of such ideas, paused for a moment before nodding thoughtfully. "I've been thinking the same thing. Maybe I should try leaving on time for a change." Ethan's decision had begun to inspire those around him. The change was subtle but evident. He wasn't preaching, but his actions spoke for themselves. And as his colleagues saw him handle work-life balance with such ease, they started to question their own priorities too. On one particularly hectic day, when Ethan had already completed his tasks and was preparing to leave, his boss, Greg, called him into his office. "Ethan, I wanted to talk to you about the new projects coming up," Greg said, his voice serious. Ethan sat down, but before he could say anything, Greg added, "You've been doing great work lately. I can tell you've been managing your time better. I think I'll give you some more responsibilities. But if you feel overwhelmed, let me know. We don't want to stretch you too thin." Ethan, surprised but grateful, thanked Greg and promised to speak up if things became too much. As Ethan left the office that evening, he reflected on how different his life had become. It wasn't just about cutting down his hours at work. It was about giving himself permission to step back and evaluate his true priorities. For so long, he had believed that being the hardest worker in the room was the ultimate goal. Now, he understood that success wasn't just about working harder. It was about working smarter and about remembering to live. One Saturday afternoon, Ethan went to visit his father, who lived about an hour away. His father, a retired engineer, had always been a source of inspiration for Ethan. Growing up, Ethan had watched his dad work tirelessly, but he had also learned the importance of balance. As they sat in the living room, sipping coffee and talking about everything and nothing, Ethan found himself feeling more connected to his father than he had in years. "You know, Dad," Ethan began, "I've been thinking a lot about the time I spend at work. I've always been so focused on getting ahead, but lately I'm realizing that I might have missed out on a lot." His father looked at him over his glasses and nodded. "I think it's important to give your all to your work, but there's no point in success if you're not living the life you want. I was always at the office, but I didn't spend enough time with your mother or you kids. Now, when I look back, I wish I had done things differently." Ethan nodded, feeling a lump form in his throat. His father's honesty struck a chord with him. It wasn't just about avoiding burnout or setting boundaries. It was about building memories, creating moments, and being present for the people who mattered. "Thanks, Dad," Ethan said softly, his voice filled with appreciation. "Don't thank me, son. I'm just glad you're figuring it out now while you still have time." That evening, Ethan went for a walk by the lake near his father's house. The sunset was beautiful, casting a warm orange glow over the water. As he stood there, breathing in the fresh air, he realized how much he had been missing by focusing solely on work. The peace, the serenity, the beauty of the world around him. He had taken it all for granted. The next morning, as he drove home, Ethan made a promise to himself. He wouldn't let work consume him again. He had the power to control his time, to prioritize the things that brought him joy, and to reconnect with what truly mattered. In the months that followed, Ethan's life began to settle into a rhythm. He kept his work schedule under control, no longer staying late unless absolutely necessary. He took up new hobbies like gardening and photography, and made time for friends he hadn't seen in ages. His friendships flourished. He spent weekends with his best friend Chris, going on hikes or grabbing lunch at the local cafe. The conversations were easy and the laughter was genuine. For the first time, Ethan realized that he wasn't just working to live, he was living to live. One Friday evening, after a particularly successful week at work, Ethan found himself sitting on the couch with a cup of tea, reflecting on how far he had come. He no longer felt the pressure to prove himself to anyone. He didn't need to stay late at the office to feel valuable. He was enough just as he was. The doorbell rang. Ethan stood up and answered it, surprised to see Sarah standing there with a wide smile. "Hey you," she said. "I thought I'd pop by and see how you're doing." "I'm good. Actually, I've been doing a lot better," Ethan said, ushering her inside. "I've been taking care of myself more, and it feels good." "That's awesome," Sarah exclaimed. "I can tell. You look more relaxed." As they chatted, Ethan felt a sense of gratitude. His life had changed in ways he never thought possible. He had learned to take control of his time, to prioritize his health, and to value the relationships that mattered most. In that moment, as Sarah laughed and they reminisced about old times, Ethan realized that balance wasn't just about managing his work hours, it was about finding peace within himself and in the world around him. Thank you, dear listeners, for joining me on this journey today. Ethan's story is one that we can all relate to, balancing the demands of work, life, and everything in between. We often find ourselves caught up in the hustle, forgetting that our time is the most precious thing we have. But just like Ethan, we have the power to make a change, to prioritize our well-being, and to cherish the moments that truly matter. If you've enjoyed this story and found it meaningful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay updated on more heartwarming tales. And remember, you're never alone in this journey. Take a deep breath, take care of yourself, and take time for what matters most. Until we meet again, take it one step at a time and embrace the peace within.